Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Khadija, the Senior Policy and Advocacy Director at Lyft. Thank you for being here. So we're going to go live. We're just going to give it just a minute or two to make sure everyone has a chance to log in and get settled. So while we're waiting, I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves in the chat, share your name, your organization, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from, and what you're excited about with this webinar. Because this work is built in community, it's great to see what our community is made up of. And just some general housekeeping. Feel free to use the chat throughout and add any questions that you'd like during the presentation and the session. We have a lovely Lyft fairy who will be collecting those for our Q&A, and this webinar will be recorded and we'll be sending out the full recording to all RSVPs. So we will get started in just a minute. Yay! Look at everyone who's here. All right. While you keep introducing yourselves in the chat, with that, I would like to introduce Michelle Roan Collins, Lyft's CEO, for some welcome remarks and some grounding in the voices that matter the most, our families. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Khadija. This is really such a moment of pride and excitement and great reflection for Lyft as we launch our first ever policy agenda called Radical Imagining. And it's so appropriate that we are able to share this moment and space with Marjorie, Corey, and Jeanette, whose leadership and commitment to building family economic mobility have really grounded this work in partnership with us over the course of years. And that true partnership has been such a gift to us. And big gratitude to each of you for joining us today for this important conversation about how family serving organizations can turn lived experience into policy. Families have long envisioned, long deserved, and long waited for policies that center their voices and expertise. When we create policy with parents and caregivers, rather than for them, those solutions are more effective, more sustainable, and they build towards a human service delivery system that is more humane. For too long, these very systems meant to support families are actually transactional and burdensome. Families need to navigate through complexity, jump through hoops of eligibility and compliance. They're weighted down by this invisible backpack filled with stigma and stereotype, false notions of who is deserved and who is not. For too long, this has been the case, and transformation doesn't happen within checkboxes. It happens within relationships, in trust, and in the ordinary yet revolutionary act of listening. When we listen, we share the burden and we lighten the load. And we answer the call from our families for change in their lives through direct service and in removing structural barriers through advocacy and through collective action. At the core of Lyft's model is our design principle and our rallying cry of hope, money, and love. Hope because dignified support matters. Money because investing in families gives them room to breathe, to dream, to achieve, to thrive. And love because people do better when they have a community that supports them and cares about them. We radically imagine policy built with hope, money, and love. grounded in humanity rather than transaction, in generosity rather than scarcity and fear, in bridges that unlock possibility rather than walls that hold families back. Now, let's take a moment to listen to Lyft members about what they wish policymakers understood.
A mí me gustaría ver sistemas más accesibles, simples y también más humanos. Muchas veces nosotros enfrentamos procesos demasiado complicados para recibir un apoyo y a la verdad esto nos crea un poco más de estrés en vez de tener una mano amiga para que nos tenga este alivio. Me gustaría, digamos, que las políticas nos tomaran en cuenta nuestras realidades, como el acceso a la vivienda, salud, educación y el empleo, fuera un poquito más claro y, digamos, sin tanta barrera. Lo digo desde la parte de inmigración por mí. Y sobre todo, que los programas se diseñen pensando en nuestro bienestar completo de todas las familias. No es solamente cumplir, digamos, números o requisitos. Creo que debería ser un sistema más flexible y más cercano a la gente para que pueda transformar realmente, se pueda transformar en realmente pues, en nuestras oportunidades.
I tell them make support accessible without friction. Families are already carrying enough. Streamline processes, modernize technology, and reduce administrative barriers would immediately transform outcomes. When parents can access resources quickly and without confusion, it strengthens not just households, it strengthens the entire economic ecosystem around them.
Hmm.
Yo les diría que hay que promover salarios dignos, un cuidado infantil para que también las mamás tengamos la oportunidad de salir a trabajar y ser parte del apoyo económico en casa, aumentar la disponibilidad de viviendas asequibles y mejorar la eficacia de los programas de asistencia social y seguridad alimentaria.
The conviction and the wisdom that families bring is extraordinary, and their voices compel us to partner with them to reshape the systems that shape their lives. And that's the invitation that's before you today. And I hope that many of you will join us in this work tomorrow and beyond. With that, I'm honored to introduce my colleague whose leadership, brilliance, and heart have guided the development of our policy agenda and is a big reason a lot of us are here today. Lyft's National Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy, Khadija Williams.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I so grateful to Lyft and to my colleague Ava Toomer, Senior National Manager of Policy and Advocacy. As we've said, we are the Systems Change Sisters and excited that we get to launch this policy agenda. So now we're just gonna jump right into what is actually in the policy agenda and how did we actually put it together? So this is our methodology to our member-driven approach to agenda setting. So one thing that you need to know first is that this policy agenda is a national family-driven vision for economic justice. It's built from the priorities, barriers, and aspirations of our parents that they named across our Lyft regions in DC, Chicago, New York, and LA. And this agenda was designed to reimagine systems so that they work with families and not on families. Now, that's important, with families. So, how was this agenda actually developed? So, here are the receipts I would like to say as to how this is a member-driven agenda. So we started with listening tours. So policy and advocacy as a department started in March, on March 1st, 2023. Within the first 30 days, I was like, okay, we need to do a listening tour because I need to make sure I understand like what Lyft families want. And so we did that across all of our Lyft regions. Then we distilled those themes from both our coaching conversations and those listening tours and member experiences to come up with our first general like ideas of like what those policies should look like. Check with our members that we distilled correctly. They said we did. Then we did a member survey in order to validate the priorities and elevate their lived expertise further. We then folded in local context research by region to understand the policy landscape and opportunities, and that's where great coalition work comes into play. We really leaned on our coalition partners across the regions in order to understand what is going on the ground to make sure that though that our what our families wanted us to focus on were tied to what is happening on the ground. And then we folded in our evidence additionally from our member driven cash plus coaching program and insights from our technical assistance insights across sectors across the country. And then once we did that, we came back to our members and said, okay, so this is what you told us. These are the 6 areas you said you want us to focus on. Here's what the landscape says. Now, here are the policy areas. Let us know, does this fit with what you wanted? What do these policies need to do in order to be successful? And what is it that we should focus on? And so we did all that in several more listening tours in order to have members validate, yes, this is what we wanted to choose. And we actually changed what our policy agenda was several times, like based on that feedback from members. And then that outcome as a result was a policy agenda rooted in both quantitative coaching data and qualitative lived experience. So then as a result of that approach, because we're a direct service organization, so we've been listening to families, we've been listening to members, like this is just a part of how we do. It was very easy to do this. And so as a result, we've gotten results. Like being a direct service organization that does policy and advocacy work is effective. And so here are just some of the wins we've already had as Lyft. So in Chicago, literally what we've been able to do is we've been able to really pass legislation around like guaranteed income and impacting so many families. In and the little graphics in this, I'll see what region is next. In New York, New York literally just started their policy advocacy work and they're already leading in coalitions. I'm like, y'all just started. How are you already leading in coalitions? That's what we're doing in New York. In DC, we started in 2023. They're already leading their own policy and advocacy strategy. This is direct service staff doing policy and advocacy work. They feel trained, they feel ready. They're like, we good, we got this. And in Los Angeles, they already had wins around student parents. And so what's so freaking cool about being a direct service, okay, I say freaking, I guess I can, it's my webinar. It's so freaking cool about being a direct service organization is because we know what needs to happen. We are able to distill our insights and our member perspectives into policy that actually works. So more receipts that obviously direct service organizations need to be in the policy and advocacy game because we know what we're doing. And so now we're going to talk about what the policy priorities actually look like based on that whole robust process I just talked about. So essentially, what way you want to look at this is that on the left is our national priorities. So that lays the foundation for the bold family-driven vision for economic justice. And then the regional agendas on the right carry this vision into action using the platform as a blueprint for transforming systems from the ground up and driving tangible impact at the local and state levels. So basically, the national provides the framing, the local provides how we're actually putting that into action. And so on the national level, it's 2 things. It's cash plus coaching equals family economic mobility. Give families money. Don't tell them what to do with that money because they know exactly what they need to do with that money. Leave them alone and let them do what they need to do because they are effective when you give them support and tie that with coaching because just like everyone else has access to supports, our families deserve that too. And so, one of the things that our members have said is that we really enjoy this because we enjoy that people are investing in us. So, actually, have coaching be a part of the cash because we have dreams too. We have goals, we have aspirations, and we deserve someone investing in us. And we're like, okay, but that's what we're doing. The next one is reimagining the social safety net. The social safety net, unfortunately, has not been a safety net. It's been a little raggedy. It's been torn up a little bit, and that's because the way that we have developed this, when it comes to like how families are served, how we think about families, all of that is put into the system such that it doesn't really serve well. There's benefits cliffs where families make a dollar more and they lose money. There's all these burdensome requirements. There's also what's happening in the landscape right now where a lot of our services are being cut because the people who are impacted are not part of decision making. And so they don't get to say, hey, actually, this is what we need. And so we want to reimagine it so it actually works for families. So that's our framework. Now, when we look at the local policies, this is what it looks like. So for for uh for Chicago, what it is basically focusing on cash policies and infusing coaching. For DC, it's strengthening the child tax credit. So that is a credit to give basically if you have a child, you get um, benefits, basically, cash benefits. So increasing access to that and infusing coaching. For LA, it's really reforming the TANF system in LA to be more inclusive of all families. Incorporating coaching and then also providing more supports for small business owners. And then finally, last but not least, for New York, it's accessible, quality, and affordable childcare. So this is one of my favorite parts because then that means we get to jump into our conversation is basically proximity equals insight equals better policy. So there is this term that I want you to understand, and it's called family serving organizations. Family serving organizations are organizations that serve families, but also do policy and advocacy work. And it's something that we haven't really talked about, but you're going to learn all about in this next portion, and it's going to blow your mind. It's really freaking cool. And essentially, family serving organizations are part of this broader movement to position direct service organizations and the community members they serve at the center of policy and advocacy work. The way that Lyft does that and the way that other family service organizations have like the same superpowers is one, we center our members, their voices. Two, we have our own data and evidence, just like family serving organizations have. And three, we're able to really, because we're so great at building coalitions as direct service organizations, because we have to do it to serve our families, we're able to understand what's happening on the ground, not just through local context, but through our families. And so it's with that, I want to segue us into this fuller conversation so that you understand why it is that family serving organizations are so crucial to the policy and advocacy movement. And if you want to know more information about our policy agendas, don't worry, you can email us and we'll share in the chats. All right, I'll pass it to Marjorie now.
Thank you so much, Khadijah. And the policy agenda, the priorities are really inspiring. And so kudos to you, Michelle, and the entire Lyft team. And it's an honor for me to kind of moderate this fireside chat to go deeper into the importance of this moment and family serving organizations and their role and how all of this work can be supported nationally and at the community level. So for the entire panel, Jeanette, Corey, and Khadijah really want to understand first and foremost, what is this moment for families? What does that look like? And why are family serving organizations so really well positioned to move differently in this moment? And from perspective of philanthropy and research and practice, I'd love to start with Jeanette.
Hi, thank you, Marjorie, and thank you to Michelle and Khadijah and all the folks at Lyft for having me on here today. My name is Jeanette. I am a program officer on the Healthy Children and Families portfolio at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And just to give you a sense of like where I'm coming from in all of this, you know, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is a large nationally reaching private foundation that advances systems change by identifying and confronting the structural barriers to health and well-being with a laser focus on structural racism as the biggest barrier to health in America. On the Healthy Children and Families portfolio specifically, we really focus on a generational goal of economic inclusion for family well-being, which is a vision where all families have the resources they need to raise healthy, thriving children, and where the economic system works for everyone. And that means that families are fully included in their full humanity, in their full dignity. Um, and we believe that all parents, families, and caregivers should have the power to shape the policies and systems that affect their lives. And we have to put mechanisms in place to make this possible. In terms of this moment, I don't think I need to, I don't think it'll be news to anybody about how families, especially those um, who don't fit a particular mold of white to biological parent American citizen are being attacked from every single angle right now. Um, and as Michelle and Khadijah laid out, systems didn't work for families for a long time. This is not new, and it's only getting more amplified. And the funding flows to family serving organizations are also being sort of like cut off at the root. Um, I and not only family serving organizations, but entire systems that have been set up, even if they do have large patches or are raggedy, as Khadijah said, um, are being dismantled. The little social safety net that existed is being dismantled. We saw the first government shutdown where SNAP payments were actually paused and sort of see the administration laying the groundwork for sort of, completely uprooting that. And I think that we are in a really important moment when it seems like all of these things are going poorly. And there's going to be a moment when there is an opening to reimagine and rebuild systems that work for families and that treat them with dignity. And family serving organizations are meeting the moment in ways that are astounding, given limited resources, and also have a vision for what a different rebuilt system could be, because we don't need to go back to sort of the patchwork that was. And so I think this is a really important moment to honor and support that role and make sure that families and caregivers are part of rebuilding.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Annette. It was really important to hear how the foundation is thinking really differently about its role in this moment, because we know so many systems and programs and policies have been disrupted. So thank you for that. I'd love to turn to you, Corey. Share us a little bit about how you're entering into this conversation, and as a researcher, how you're thinking about family serving organizations stepping into this moment.
Yeah, thanks, Marjorie. Hi, my name's Corey Georgopoulos. I'm a senior associate at Innovation Network. We're a small nonprofit consulting firm. We do a lot of learning and evaluation work, especially centered on equity. For the past 2 years, my colleagues Rebecca, Kayla, and I have been partnering with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to really understand these family serving organizations, like their ways of working and their needs. Lyft as a family serving organization themselves, was really a key partner in this work, and contributed a lot of great insight. So I'm really excited to be here to talk more about this. So in terms of my perspective, I'm not doing this work on the ground. I'm a researcher. I just come in and see what's been happening. But I think what I'm seeing as really important for family serving organizations right now, from my perspective, is kind of this urgency to recognize and elevate them as an important category of organization that is contributing to systems change. There currently isn't a ton out there on what we're thinking of as family serving organizations, and especially like how they're able to like center and leverage family voices in like the policy of systems change.
Mhm.
And like people don't resource what they don't know about, right? And so I think part of the importance of doing research with FSOs and like really understanding them lies in like establishing them as players in the policy and systems change space. And they have been, this is not new. They have been contributing to these spaces. We need to understand how they do what they do. Like, how does their service work and their policy work interact internally? Um, Part of our research was dedicated to like starting to understand this, but so much is left to explore. Um, and in particular, like because of the way they work and the unique contributions they can make to policy and systems change, that might mean that they also have like unique needs that are currently not being addressed because they're not visible, right? So, unmet needs also means that the FSOs might have less capacity or fewer resources to engage in activities and like systems change that is going to directly benefit families they serve or like pursuing the change families want to see, right? Um, in terms like I'll just plus one to Jeanette on this current moment, like um yeah, I think like you can't really afford to leave people out when the other side is working so hard to silence them. So I think it's really, really vital. It's always vital to like center family voices, but like in this moment it feels even more urgent, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Corey. And we'll put a link in the chat to the amazing report that you all produced about the research that you did looking at family serving organizations. But Khadijah, I'd love to turn to you again to share a little bit more about why Lyft, stepped into this moment so boldly. You're radically reimagining what your work might look like. Share a little bit more about why this moment really mattered to the organization.
Yes, this moment in particular really matters. I know that so many of us had to witness what our families had to go through when SNAP benefits were um were cut off due to the shutdown.
Mhm,
When
mhm,
there was a lot of political gamemanship regarding like should they be funded? Should SNAP be funded? Who should fund it? Where? How much? And that example is an exemplar of what the problem is when there are challenges to the economic sector, we come out in force. Think about 2008,
mhm,
and we pump in the resources. We're just like, we got to save for the economy, for the economy, for the economy. But when we think about our families, we don't think of our families and their needs as the same important critical infrastructure to our economy as well. Our families are raising the next future leaders. They are contributing. They have
mhm,
dreams, they have goals and aspirations, but too often they are seen as a liability. And when we do that, we risk not only
mhm,
like all of our families and all the children who can, go on to contribute, but
mhm,
also just our humanity and our morality. And so in this moment, it was particularly important because it's always important, but for this moment, it was an example of what happens when you have family voice completely devoid
mhm,
from
mhm.
any sort of political
Yeah,
conversations. This is
yeah,
the result.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that, Khadijah, because stepping into this moment means, focusing on what we know is certain. There is a lot of uncertainty for families and for organizations and communities, but there also is a lot of certainty. Our founder, Ann Mosley, says, we know what works for families, and what Lyft is lifting up is what's working for families, like starting with their voice and making certain that those policies are reflective of their voice. So thank you for centering that. I'd like to go back to Jeanette. I believe the foundation coined this term, family serving organizations, right? And so I'm very interested in knowing from your perspective, what was missing in the philanthropic landscape that you felt important, the foundation felt important to step into and try to address? And then what have been some of your learnings as a result of this?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you, Marjorie. And sometimes we wind up, you know, trying to describe the concept and then a term takes on a life of its own. And so it's exciting to see
Mm-hmm.
that concept take a life of its own. So this started for us in earnest in, I believe it was 2021. And at the time, we were exploring how we could support centering children and families uh, in our economic recovery. We were like, sort of in the immediate sort of intensity of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there were sort of federal dollars flowing to support our economy. We wanted to make sure that that was implemented equitably and that children and families' well-being and health were supported in that. And in doing that, actually, Lyft is someone who really influenced us in this way. Um, Recognizing that there were organizations that provided direct services to children and families, had a particular sort of focus, and were centering children and families' well-being and their perspectives inherently in how they work, and were accountable to children and families, and were actively influencing policy and systems change efforts. But often we're in a posture of reacting to agendas that were set by national organizations or organizations who maybe the policy is their sort of main or sole focus. And so we're in that reactionary sort of having to respond to agendas that weren't set necessarily with families, and who were also uh, doing the work to partner in coalitions and to also partner with advocacy organizations, but did not have budget lines dedicated to this kind of work. So it was a gap that we recognized, and I'll name it's due. There is a limiting belief in philanthropy about a false binary between direct services and systems change. And if something looks like direct services, it doesn't. It's not going to lead to systems change, which I think is a harmful false binary. Um, and so we decided to do something that was a different approach for us, and recognizing organizations that were in this space of accountability to families, and also
Mm-hmm.
like leaning into expressing, um, wanted to more proactively influence policy agendas. So we supported multiple organizations in this, and then also wanted to support research that knowledge could be shared beyond us, because um, it doesn't necessarily help if one or a few foundations are supporting this kind of work. It really only helps if a behavior is taken up by the sector.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I thank you for that because this moment really does require paradoxical thinking, right? We can no longer hold on to binary. It is always a both and. And I'm curious, given that you've invested in the organizations, you've invested in research, you're collaborating with other partners in the sector. What does a meaningful investment in a family serving organization look like from your perspective?
From our perspective, it is part of it is leaning into the sort of relational ways in which family serving organizations demonstrate so much with
Mhm.
families. And so we supported 9 great organizations, including Lyft.
Mhm.
And it meant asking, like, what would be meaningful? What would be a meaningful investment that would strengthen your organizational infrastructure to be able to do this work and lean into this role that you are already playing?
Mhm.
Um, and it looked different. It looks different for every organization, but it's not about funding a time limited program.
Mhm.
It is not about sort of looking at impact or success as particular policy win. It is about what supports this work to take place in a meaningful way over time. Um, and it's been really exciting for me to see Lyft that trajectory of developing a proactive vision for economic justice for families, doing that with your members. And that takes time and investment. That takes people, that takes looking at organizational structure. And so grants that support that work, not necessarily just sort of discrete programs.
Yeah, thank you. Because it is about, partnership in a different way, right? And making certain that it's not just the investment in financial resources, but the time and additional collaboration and partnerships. And I'd love, Corey, for you to come back into the conversation. We shared a link in the chat to your report, Cultivating Systems Change Through Direct Service. Could you share a little bit more about what you learned and what you're recommending going forward? That would really be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, from a research, so here's one thing that I think um, prompted the research, and is a misconception that we need to keep fighting, and so we need to keep
Mm.
investing in the visibility of FSOs and research around FSOs is like that FSOs don't have the expertise necessary to actually engage in policy and systems change spaces, which is false. And hopefully when you read the report,
Mhm.
you'll be just as convinced as I am. Um, so from my perspective, I think what I think what there needs to be is kind of this shift in understanding of like how, as Jeanette was saying, how systems change happens and who are the people to make it happen, right? And so research ties into this by providing a evidence base to like keep building kind of this narrative and share out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I do think that across the organizations that are profiled in the report, you have some very, very strong visions and leadership, right, within those
Mhm.
organizations. So, Khadijah, I'm curious for Lyft, what were the things that really were the ingredients that you felt are important to do this work towards policy and systems change? And what would you recommend to other family serving organizations that are on this webinar, out in communities doing this work? What would be your recommendations?
Yep. So to answer the first part about what is needed, first is funding the process, funding the process, funding the process.
Mhm.
Literally, our WJF, because of their funding, we were able to hire me and hire Ava to build out this work at our organization, to build the capacity of our regions, to show our regions that they actually have a lot of skills already that we need in the policy space. So that's the first thing. That is like the
Mhm.
core ingredient is like literally funding. Because if there weren't no funding, my role literally wouldn't exist.
Mhm.
The second thing that's needed is really understanding that as direct service organizations, you have the raw ingredients already. You have the policy expertise just in everything you do. When you are talking to a client and the client is telling you about the challenges that they're facing and you're helping them through that, that is policy knowledge. When you are trying to navigate, like, oh my goodness, why did they implement this policy this way? Now I have to go and figure out how to navigate this. That's policy knowledge and expertise. And I'm a policy wonk, I love my policy wonks. We are like we like this, but sometimes we can make policy so esoteric that it can be hard for direct service organizations to see themselves in this work. And
Mhm.
so the second ingredient is knowing that you actually have already what you need to do effective policy and advocacy work. And that's literally knowing how policies are impacting communities. We have the best expertise,
Mhm.
like ground nut, like just the best expertise. So that's the second thing. The third thing is work with others. I love, because of my organizing background, I love one-on-ones. I will have a one-on-one with anyone and everybody. And what I have learned from those one-on-ones is that there's so much knowledge in this space. And so whether you have like you're already funded and you're trying to think about how to expand your policy and advocacy work, or if you've never feel like you've done policy work, and I can promise you have. You just don't think you have, but you have, I can assure you.
Mhm,
But if you feel
mhm,
like you have it and you want to get started, talk to others because this system works because we are all in it together and we're already collaborating. We are so good at collaboration, y'all. Like no one can beat us on that. And so using that skill in order to do this work. And the third ingredient that I would say, because I was going to answer the last question last, but I didn't. I think I
That's
promised out
okay.
loud. So that we're going to go with it, is really understanding like based on talk to your families. You already know how to talk to your families. Literally ask them, "Hey, what policy should we focus on?" The level of clarity that your families will have will blow your mind because they already know. And so just do what you're already doing and talk to them. And then if you're still like trying to figure it out, just be like, this is what our family said, and just put it out in the world. I guarantee you people will respond positively. Those are
Mhm.
the three things I would say to other direct service organizations. Feel free to help me up and consider me one of your besties. Happy to be helpful.
Absolutely.
And you already got this. You
Yeah.
already got this.
I love that. And I'm going to ask Jeanette and Corey the same question because I love that there's this opportunity. You all are the best, kind of combination of a panelist. You've got philanthropy, you've got research, you've got practice moving policy and systems change. So the question would be, or is, Jeanette and Corey, what would you recommend to your colleagues in your sector? What would you recommend to philanthropy that's moving into supporting family serving organizations? Corey, what would you recommend to researchers who are thinking about supporting family serving organizations moving into more of system change and policy? And I'll start with Corey first. How's that?
Sure. Um, Great question. I think it would probably be similar to what I would talk about with our clients as well, which, a lot of the times are foundations, which is like we should just complicate the notion of what it means to do systems change, right? And start listening to um what systems change means for family serving organizations. I think like, we've referred to this before that like many of them conceive of direct service as being part of systems change. And I think that's really right, but that's not something that is like that I see in the literature that I like hear in like conversations with other folks. Um, so I think there's this kind of definitional problem that we want to like talk about and like what categories are we using and who are they serving right now in our research, right? And how do we like refine them and like, you know, make them more interesting so that they're actually like the insights that we're capturing are going to be relevant to like these different types of organizations. I hope that was
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Corey. Jeanette, what advice, guidance are you giving or wanting to give to others in philanthropy thinking about supporting family serving organizations?
Yeah, I love this question. I think I know that there is a saying often in philanthropy that, you meet one foundation, you meet one foundation. And I'm
Yes.
not so, I want to challenge that a little bit because there are certain, there are differences among funders, and there are some of the same sort of behaviors that we that we tend to do. And I think one is often thinking about, okay, we have a particular strategy. And I would say for us on the Healthy Children and Families team, this was a new approach in supporting organizations that were sort of expressing a sort of um, an abundance of roles around direct service and policy and systems change. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't like a one and done. Um, and so I think it is important to look at how are family serving organizations part of the whatever your focus is, how are they part of the ecosystem already, and how are they embedded within your strategy, not standalone. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to kind of this is not an add-on, but more integrated. That's the process that we're doing right now at the Robert Wood
Mhm.
Johnson Foundation on our Healthy Children and Families team. We are continuing to make sure that families are at the center of making decisions and setting agendas around systems that impact their lives. And um, we are at a moment when uh, we are wanting to also make sure we're supporting power building and
Yep.
making sure that we are recognizing that um, there are multiple roles and multiple aspects of work that goes into a sort of a thriving ecosystem that family serving organizations are part of that.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I would say to that, there's a question in the Q&A, not to jump ahead, but there's a question about balancing like the sort
Mhm.
of eroding nonprofit infrastructure and meeting the moment and also like keeping, an eye on the long-term change. And I think we can do more as a sector to support organizations to make decisions that they need to make and also make sure that we are funding all like um, folks who are working at
Mhm.
all different levels because systems change can't happen if um, families are not thriving. Um,
Yeah.
so it all works together.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. I have a follow-up question if we have time, but I do want to go to our audience and open it up for those questions. And I believe, Alex, are you going to be moderating for us?
I am Abigail here in the Lyft admin here.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody. Feel free to question in the chat or in the Q&A section. And I'm going to go through and read them out to our panelists so they can answer them. So first up, and apologies in advance if I mispronounce your name. First up from Charles Phipps, curious to know the insights you've gained in the Deep South and how you view the
Mhm.
implementation of your strategy within the Deep South versus Northern or quote unquote blue ideological states.
Wonderful. Khadijah, are you all working in any southern states?
We are for our technical assistance work, and right now for our policy work, we are focusing on our regions, which are very deep blue states. And you'd be
Mhm.
surprised that there is some like stuff that is happening in red states that's just like deplorable. Blue states aren't perfect either, but it's a very
Mhm.
good question. What I would say, kind of thinking about our technical assistance work as well as our policy and advocacy work, which is in blue states, and some of our technical assistance work, which is in red states,
Mhm.
is what differs for those who care about families is the way they think about tackling the problem. What I have found, and what's been really helpful because I have a mediation background, which is incredibly helpful for policy and
Mhm.
advocacy, highly recommend doing mediation, is the issue is not necessarily one of disagreement in that like we should care about families, though I get why people wouldn't
Mhm.
really believe that. But I'll give you two examples. One, Trump bonds, they're baby bonds.
Mhm.
They're not there's a lot of challenge issues with them. There's a lot of issues with them, but it is some kind of way to address like the issue of family poverty, even if like progressives wouldn't necessarily agree with it. Another
Mhm.
example is a child tax credit. Republicans increased that. And so there are examples, and I say this as a bleeding heart liberal,
Mhm.
I'm real progressive, but there are examples, if you look, of promising policies that actually did start in red and states. What the issue
Mhm.
is that we as progressives need to learn how to communicate in a way that shows that we have the same values and that the work will benefit. So, for example, I'm in a Benefits Cliff Coalition, and we talk
Mhm.
about if you actually like invest in families and stop the benefits cliff, which is basically if you earn $1 more, basically you lose your benefits. That's what it is at its
Mhm.
heart.
Mhm.
Then
Mhm.
it actually improves the economy. A lot of people who are like small business owners are those who are, either lower income or immigrant, and you want them contributing to the economy. And so even though I didn't exactly answer your question in regards to like what is happening in red states, the way I did answer it, I think is important in that we got to get better at our messaging and we got to figure out where it is that we need to where we do have alignment, and listening to our families is not partisan.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah,
listening,
absolutely.
hearing them
Yeah.
is just hearing them. And that's what we need to focus on
Yeah.
and lean on other organizations that are doing this work in states where rights are being taken away, where resources are being taken away, to have a better chance at success because you're working with more people.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I would
that's
say.
really helpful, Khadijah. You're lifting up a set of values that are important to, making stronger programs and policy, and, recognizing the recommendations and voices of family is really important value. But Jeanette, the foundation is a national foundation. You're working in, all states and all places. Is there anything that you would like to share about work with family serving organizations? You mentioned that that was a cohort of them, right? Were any of them situated in the South? And any, distinct lessons learned or information you'd like to share? Or Corey as well?
I can just share a little bit too about just, as an evaluator and researcher from that perspective. I do have some projects I'm currently working on that are located in the South. And I think one thing I'll add to what Khadijah's saying, which is I think it's totally right. Like we have to also change the way in which we conceive of success and progress, depending on the cultural context and like region, right? It's going to look different in a different political context on like what milestones we're like considering, what is significant to push change. And so you're not going to be able to kind of research and measure like the success of different strategy in the South in the same way that you would in another region of the US, just as, you wouldn't kind of like transfer a US measurement framework like just anywhere in
Mhm.
the world, right? So that's also a piece of it is that like not only do you have to kind of like find that values alignment, you also have to like kind of like change your mindset about like what progress and change look like in a different context and what is meaningful to the people who live there, right?
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Jeanette, anything to add here?
Yeah. For context, RWJF is a national foundation. We don't have a particular place-based strategy in the South, and yet we have um, recognized the importance of sort of how structural racism operates in the South and how it's important to address that and how it impacts children and families. I would say a couple of things. One is one of the things that it's one of those things that I should have known, but the research sort of put it into, sharper focus for me was how family serving organizations are sort of at the center of implementing sort of pilots or new alternatives that have not yet made their way to policy, but they start and they seed somewhere local. And then that can seed influence for national impact. And the importance of family serving organizations in driving those um,
Mhm.
and lifting up what are the different what works, what doesn't work, um, and a lot of those innovations have started in the South. So that is one that I would name, and that is continuing to happen. Um, I also this is a little bit broader, but the authoritarian context that we're in right now has been true for the South for a long time. And so organizations that are in the South even have been working under these kinds of conditions. And there's a lot to learn from sort of how to disrupt power and lift up kind of work under these the conditions that we're all experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Not fully
Thank
formed
you.
thought, but
Well, it's the reality too, so really appreciate bringing that context. That was a great question, Charles, and I believe we may have 2 minutes for one more question.
Yeah, this was alluded to earlier, and Jeanette sort of started the ball rolling. But Dr. Akbar asked, what kind of recommendations or support would you promote for organizations weighing their ability to continue the fight for better systems while also just helping keeping the family's lights on?
I can start. So this is where I kind of going to get on my soapbox, but attempt to be brief. So one of the things that would happen when we would talk to funders, and I talked to other FSOs, and they said the same thing, is that policy funders would say, "Sorry, we don't fund direct service," and then direct service funders would say, "We don't fund policy," and then we do grassroots work. They'd say, "Well, you have to basically have a budget where you." Essentially in your garage, we're operating from your garage. And this is where it's really important to have funders as part of this because we do both. We do direct service and policy and advocacy. That's what FSOs are. Fund us so that we can do both because funding us for direct service will give us additional insights to then use to make the policy better so that none of this is even necessary. So that's my soapbox. I'm
You
hopefully
know,
done.
Khadija, not a soapbox at all. That is the truth and the reality of it. And I do think that the work that you all have done, both the work that the foundation has done, Corey, your work in research and the practice work is really important. And lifting this up now is the opportunity, is the right moment to be doing this work. So I thank you all for your insights, sharing the learnings as well as recommendations. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle, but really appreciate this opportunity to engage you in this important conversation. Thank you.
Yes, doubling down on the thanks. Thank you so much, Marjorie, for being such a skillful facilitator and holding space for this important conversation and just all of the amazing insights and gems that were shared. I mean, some of the things around needing to meet the urgency of the moment and the false dichotomies that exist and the need for paradoxical thinking. I really love that concept and the need to invest in the capacity and agency of family service organizations to be able to do the work that we are clear about. I also really love that because we do have clarity. We just need the investment, right, in order to be able to be unleashed. And that clarity is coming from the relationship and proximity that we have with the communities that we're keeping at our center and leading the way. All of these such important points, important work, and we cannot do it alone. We cannot do this alone. I hope that you will join us and partner with us to be able to continue to expand this conversation, expand the concept of what is possible in order to be able to change the circumstances for too many families that are living in poverty across the country. Before we close, we started with member voice, so wanted to make sure that we're able to have a moment to end with hearing from our members. So let's listen to some of the parents reflecting on what it means to be heard.
It feels powerful, very powerful. I am being heard, and that's all I ask, is for me to be heard. Not just for me, but for others in the same situation.
It's extremely valuable because it means that someone understands and recognizes that I can have the ability to articulate my own narrative and my own story and the impact that things have on me, and it's respected. And not only is it respected, but it is taken and used to further legislation, and that's very powerful.
Pues yo me siento escuchada, valorada y que no solo es por mí alzar la voz. Yo sé que hay cientos de familias que también están pasando por situaciones similares y aún no lo hablan. Yo soy esa voz y me siento muy orgullosa de todo esto.
It's affirming and deeply energizing. For years, families have offered valuable insight that often goes unheard. Seeing LIFT reflect lived experience in its policy agenda demonstrates that the community intelligence is finally being recognized as strategic intelligence. It's powerful to know that what I've navigated personally is shaping solutions at a broader scale.
Para mí significa, la verdad, dignidad y mucho respeto. Durante mucho tiempo, muchas familias han sentido que pues otros hablan por nosotros, pero ser reconocidos con la experiencia es afirmar que mi voz tiene un peso. Significa que mi historia no es solo un testimonio, sino es una herramienta para construir soluciones y mejorar el sistema. Es sentirse, me siento, digamos, como parte de un cambio y no solo el beneficiario. También significa reconocer el valor de todo lo que hemos superado como familias, nuestras luchas, aprendizaje y sobre todo nuestra resiliencia.
Thank you once again for your time, for your partnership, for your belief in what we can achieve when we listen to and when we invest in parents. A survey is going to be popping up in just a moment, so please take a moment to just fill that out and know that we will share this recording after the session and follow up by email. And until then, thank you so much.